We talk a lot about training our spirit. So it's not just training, you know this even with what you do in the fitness industry. It's not just physical. You're actually strengthening and growing your entire being. And especially as a martial artist, that's really, really important to us. And I could feel my spirit starting to rise. I could feel my spirit getting stronger.
Wits and Weights community, welcome to another episode of the Wits and Weights podcast. Today I'm speaking with Cheryl Ilov, a dynamic force who challenges the misconceptions of aging, fitness, and the power of the female spirit. From her starting martial arts at 47, eventually becoming a black belt, to her unique perspective on somatic movement and its integral role in vitality, Cheryl integrates the worlds of dance, martial arts, and physical therapy. We will explore the art of movement, the challenges faced by women in fitness, and actions you can take to enhance vitality and build confidence no matter your age or where you're starting from. Cheryl is an author, speaker, physical therapist, martial artist, dancer, and former chronic pain patient. With over 20 years' experience as a physical therapist in private practice, she's helped thousands of clients recover from pain and injuries by integrating the science of physical therapy with the art of movement. Cheryl firmly believes that our body has an incredible capacity to heal itself and that everyone can enjoy vibrant health and vitality at every stage of life. She's also a second-degree black belt in an ancient Japanese art called Ninpo Tai Jutsu. From her own experience of beginning training at the tender age of 47 and becoming her teacher's first female black belt 10 years later, she discovered that there's an incredible amount of strength and power in each and every one of us just waiting to be unleashed. Cheryl's the author of two books, one titled Forever Fit and Flexible, Feeling Fabulous at 50 and Beyond, and The Reluctant Ninja, How a Middle-Aged Princess Became a Warrior Queen. She's also the host of the FemiNinja Project podcast, which is about overcoming obstacles, personal empowerment, restoring human dignity, and alternative health and healing. Cheryl, it is so good to finally meet you and have you on the show.
Well, thank you, Philip. It is an honor to be here. I really appreciate it.
So you've got quite the background. We were talking about that before we started, and we're going to dive into some of that. This is a time when people are always seeking shortcuts, right? This is a time when people get complacent as they age. This is what I see, at least. And here you are, you dive into martial arts at the age of 47. You're a dancer, physical therapist. You talk about unleashing strength and power. One term that I've often used on this show is self-mastery, specifically physical self-mastery, but even in general. And it's something that I really admire about you and your story. So what is the driving force behind your passion for this mastery?
Oh, wow. What a great question. Honestly, Philip, I think what it is my incomparable stubbornness and my resilience, or not my resilience, but my resistance to accepting the status quo. As we mature, some people might call it age, but I say we mature.
Mhm.
As we mature, we start to hear things like, well, you're never going to be able to do this again, or you have to be careful. I just spoke with a retired orthopedic surgeon yesterday for my podcast and talking about, like bone density, bone loss, and the fear that comes along with aging because we're told that all of these horrible things are going to happen to us. And it's not necessarily true because what we believe is what we become. And if we hear that, those labels, well, you're getting older, you're getting frail, you're going to lose bone density, you won't be able to do these things, eventually we believe that. And what we believe is what we become. So I think it's really important for us as we get older to flip the script and kind of look at what do we want our life to be like over the next 5, 10 years. Project ourselves, see ourselves as in our 60s, 70s, 80s. And that to me really kind of lights a fire underneath me, especially because I've been told so many times about the things that I wouldn't be able to do. I was a chronic pain patient when I was in my mid 30s. I went through another really difficult time when I was in my 40s. And both times I had people almost, I felt like they were patting me on the head and saying, don't you worry, it's going to be okay. And we are going to take care of you. And that was just what I needed to hear because I don't want anybody taking care of me. And I don't want anybody telling me what I can and cannot do.
Oh man, that stubborn streak is relatable to me at the very least. It's funny. My wife and I both have that. Sometimes they say opposites attract, but we're actually very similar, so it kind of butt heads in that way. But it's always fun because you're right. It's like why do we need to accept where we are? Why can't we do what is physically possible, mentally possible? And many of us we don't discover that until we have some of that wisdom of, as you said, maturity, age, whatever it is,
Mhm.
that we may have been afraid in our 20s, or people have been telling us things for years, and at some point you just listen to it because you don't know any better perhaps, and then the wisdom starts to reveal itself as you try things, right, and as you
Mhm.
take that action. So I love that idea of just doing it and saying forget what these people are saying. The other
Mhm.
thing is, Cheryl, right, outliers tend to be the ones that make progress. I don't know about you. Have you found that just the status quo is where the complacency lies, and that outliers are the ones that are kind of changing the world?
Absolutely, and the, ability to go out of your comfort zone, and there's a reason why we don't like to go out of our comfort zone because it's pretty uncomfortable, so
Mhm.
we do like what's known, and we do like to kinda stay in the status quo, but I think along with the incomparable stubbornness comes that, once and the wisdom as we get older, it's, um, it's the adversity. We all have a lot of issues
Mhm.
and obstacles in our life and challenges, and how we deal with those adversities and come out through it on the other end is basically how we are setting up ourselves up for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, for sure. And part of that adversity for many of us comes in the physical world, right? With when it
Mhm,
comes to fitness and health. And I always argue that health is the most important thing you have because it enables everything else in your life, no matter how important all those other things are. So we focus on getting stronger. We talk about movement, nutrition, mindset on this podcast, and then
mhm.
cultivating that agency to constantly improve, to bust through the status quo. So I want to set some context here in your journey to feeling fabulous at 50, right? What are the most commonly spouted misconceptions you alluded to that do hold people back about aging and fitness? And feel free to add being a woman to the mix.
Okay, well, I think being a woman is not that much different, I guess, than,
Mhm.
men go through the same experiences as well, just maybe in a different way, but that we are being told that the experts, the from media, from the health experts, of what to expect when we're aging, and again, I'm using air quotes, that of course we're going to be losing our bone density, so we have to be really careful. It's natural to start
Mhm.
losing your balance. You're going to need these medications. All of these things that we have to do. It's almost like it's a prescribed course of action that is inevitable.
Inevitable, yes.
And that's not true. And as you said in my introduction, I am a former chronic pain patient. And that happened when I was in my mid 30s. And I was a chronic pain patient for 2.5 years. And I was a medical professional. At that point, I was not a physical therapist, I was a respiratory therapist. So I was doing everything that I was supposed to do according to the Western medicine model. I went to all the PT appointments, I took the medications, I did the stupid exercises and stretches that the PTs gave me, went to all the doctor's appointment. My life was just a mess. It was horrible. And, I'm sure I was depressed. Back then, I couldn't even identify it. I was in too much physical pain. But after 2.5 years, I finally realized, hey, I'm not only not getting better, I'm getting worse. And this regimen that I was following, I think was keeping me in that pain spasm cycle that I
Mhm.
couldn't get out of. So it wasn't until one of my doctors told me that I would never be able to do my laundry and my grocery shopping all in the same day because the arthritis in my spine was so severe, I would end up being bedridden, that it was just like, "Whoa, wait a minute, you don't
Mm.
understand. I'm planning on going back to ballet class." And she actually laughed in my face and said, "Wait a minute, you don't understand. You are a chronic pain patient. You will always be a chronic pain patient. You will never have the life you wanted or the life you had before. Even if you could go back to ballet, you can't do that. You're way too old." And she knew that one of my goals was to go to physical therapy school and get my master's degree. And she says, "You can forget about PT school because you are way too damaged, you are way too broken, and even if you could do the work, which you can't, you are way too old." I was 36.
That is unbelievable. And you mentioned all of those things like bone balance, no, bone density and balance and medications being inevitable, and it's almost like the cause and effect are flipped. right? Like these things get that way probably because we're not doing the things that we should be doing and could be doing, and now we want to do those things, and the
Mhm.
medical establishment is kind of stuck in their what I call sick care mode rather than
Right,
healthcare mode.
right.
That's fascinating. And being a physical therapist, so I'm going through left shoulder therapy
Mhm,
as well, and you kind of see those messages even in that industry where don't do too much, like don't take it too fast, take it easy. And here I am wanting to train and get stronger, and you got to have the right mix. So let's segue into the somatic movement because I want to understand more about that.
mhm,
I think you talk about it in your book, which is up behind you, Forever Fit and Flexible. My personal association with that is like the mind body connection, at
mhm.
least in the context of strength training, but maybe that's a narrow slice of what you mean. So, what is somatic movement and why is it important?
Well, absolutely, it is the mind-body connection, and, the somatic movement, it's like taking that mind-body connection and really fine-tuning it and taking it to a much deeper level. As well as being a physical therapist, I'm also something called a Feldenkrais practitioner,
Mhm.
and it's a four-year training program, and it is basically a very highly sophisticated form of neuromuscular re-education based on the scientific principle of neuroplasticity, that our brain and our nervous system and our bodies, our mindset can change all during the course of our lifetime, that we are incredibly malleable beings, starting with our nervous system and our brain. And the funny thing is, Philip, you're going to love this. When I was in physical therapy school, we were taught, and that wasn't really that long ago. I graduated in 96. We were taught in all of our neurology classes that this incredible miracle of nature is what I call it, this neuroplasticity disappears at the age of 14.
Oh,
That
jeez.
at that point, we're so hardwired that we can't change anything.
Mm,
And how depressing is that? I mean, when you think about it. But of course, now neuroscience has finally caught up
caught up. Yeah.
with the idea that yes, this neuroplasticity not only is with us forever as long as we have a pulse, but it's incredibly powerful, and that we can use this power of neuroplasticity to change our lives and to keep us going in the right direction until the day we take our last breath.
It's an empowering thing, right?
Mhm,
Like you said,
very much
to
so.
no matter your age, it's like when I get the question, "Well, I'm over 50, how can I start strength training?" Like, "I'm over 50." It's like this block of once you hit a number or even 40. I mean, I'm 42 and I'm like, "I'm not old, come on." You hear that like, I'm a woman over 40. Is XYZ possible? And it's like, you can be 75 and you can lift a barbell and deadlift for the first time. It doesn't matter. And that's why I love your story because you're going to talk a little bit about it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And bringing the brain is really fascinating because the idea of adaptation beyond something like evolution, right? We often think of like species and things like that, but in real life, in your life as a biological creature, that you can change so many things about your body with your mind and change your mind itself is
Mhm,
really fascinating. So I want to talk about vitality in that
mhm,
context, thriving and kind of link it all together. What is your perspective on that, right? You talk about this at every stage of life. That's what we're talking
mhm,
about. And what
mhm.
is the most important component for that vitality if you had to choose just one?
Mhm. Well, first of all, I love the fact that you brought the biology into it, because we
Mhm.
can change our biology, and it has even been proven that we can change our DNA. So, but
Right.
that's another long story. But it all does start with your mindset, and that's, I think, where the vitality comes from as well. Again, we've all had a lot of really terrible things happen in our life's journey. Life isn't meant to be easy. I wish it were, but it's not. And it's how we deal with a lot of those adversities, I think, that really has a lot to do with vitality. If I look back at some of the horrible things that have happened to me in my life, I could be incredibly angry, I could be bitter, but you don't want to do that because it's really bad for your complexion. So, ladies, don't be bitter. It ages you very quickly. But if you could look at some of those things that have happened to you along the way and kind of flip the script and say, okay, it was really terrible that that happened. And I really struggled mightily as I was going through it, but look at where I am now. And look at where all the opportunities come from those adversities. So to me, that's what vitality is. It's a positive energy. It's a sense of, what, life really is amazing, and it does provide so many wonderful opportunities. Even thinking of, look back at the pandemic, that was horrible, really horrible. But look at all of the positive things, well, the few positive
Mm.
things that did come out of that is that we did become a lot more connected, through the internet because we had no choice. So now, there's a lot more telemarketing, not telemarketing, telemedicine. The podcasting
Mhm.
community has just exploded. I get to talk to you. I met you through another podcasting connection. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be talking to a woman in Israel. It's just amazing how many wonderful things have opened up. Yes, as a baby boomer, I'm here to say the technology is terrifying when you're learning it for the first time. But like everything, change is inevitable. You could either fight the change or you can go along with it and figure it out.
Yeah, ride it like a ship on a wave.
Mhm,
Um, a lot of what you're saying reminds me of positive psychology. I remember reading something how the vast majority of people have positive thoughts, right? Even though
mhm,
we out loud don't necessarily talk that way in social media. And for example, cancer patients will often think about how other cancer patients had it worse than them in whatever
mhm.
way that they're going through treatment, and therefore it by comparison makes things seem better. So you kind of alluded to that of like bad things happen, they're going to happen, they have happened, and where are you now, and this is the future, and we're always looking forward to what's going to come from that. It's like the question, what would you tell your younger self to change? And like often the right answer is nothing, right? Because you wouldn't have gone through those experiences.
Right.
So I'm just you'll find that when I ask questions, Cheryl, I go off on tangents and just start talking and thinking out loud because I love this the philosophy of all of this.
Actually, I love tangential conversations.
Good,
I
good,
mean,
good. Yeah, so vitality in the context of it starting with your mindset, because again, neuroplasticity and the physical manifestation of what we think. Otherwise, we can't do it, right? We can't get
mhm,
healthy, fit, eat better, whatever it is,
mhm,
martial arts without starting there. So if we're to get very specific and actionable about it, right? So
mhm.
people have something to walk away with. What would you say are say three things a listener can do to improve their vitality in that context?
Okay, well, starting off right now, I would say 3 things. Turn off the TV
Mm,
and the radio. Don't listen to the messages that we are receiving, through a lot of the advertisement because it's gonna mess with your mind. Don't let anybody else influence you.
mm,
Second thing is go outside, even if it's hot, even if it's cold, even if it's raining.
mm.
Take the time just to go outside, be in nature, have some time with yourself, and really have that moment where you can access your inner being, your inner child, if you will, your deepest thoughts, your desires. You can't do that when you're distracted by, the barking dogs, which of course we both love, or the television or the radio. You need to do that in absolute silence. When I say absolute silence, I'm not talking about you can hear the birds singing, you can hear the wind in the trees. Those are the things that really help clear your mind. A
Mm.
lot of people will say meditate. I can't say meditate because I can't do it myself.
I'm with you there. I'm with you there.
I have failed, meditation miserably, and I've had so many people, the meditation gurus, and I've had a lot of them on my podcast, "You're doing it wrong."
Uh-huh.
And, "Let me help you, I will help you do it the right way." So, I hear that and I say, "Huh, one more thing in my life that I'm doing wrong. No, thank you, I don't wanna do that."
It's an added stressor.
Right. So what I do is I will do some movement patterns. I'll do what we call Kihon, practice just some martial arts movement patterns. Then I can clear my mind.
Mm.
That works for me. So for your listeners, find something that really resonates with you and does work for you. Whether it's, a walking meditation, whether it's just sitting outside in silence, just find what works for you. And that is incredibly powerful because that way you can get rid of all the junk, all the stuff that's in the back of your head, of what you're hearing, those subliminal messages from the media, from other people, from the experts, and really figure out what you want for yourself and what you need for yourself at that moment in time.
This is really great advice. I mean, let's break these down. The first one about not just turning things off. I mean, I would add social media to the mix, right?
Absolutely.
Which I know you were implying that too, but just I even think news. Like I used to be a news junkie, and
Mhm.
the only news I look at now is like the local paper just to kind of get the headlines, and so my daughters are aware of, I've got two young daughters. They need to be aware of what's going on. But
Mhm,
beyond that, it's just a bombardment of trash. I mean, it's just like terribly mixed messages, and not even mixed. They're highly biased messages, right?
mhm,
Like you said, they're trying to sell you something. Fitness industry,
mm,
IG, all that same thing. So getting away from it is a great idea.
mhm,
Go lift weights, go for a walk, go whatever. And then the other
mhm.
thing of having time with yourself, I will tell people, "Hey, breath work and meditation are 2 options to reduce stress," but I don't do them. So, you know, I lift weights to reduce stress. I go for a walk to reduce stress. I will walk around the house and just start talking and getting my thoughts out of my brain to do what
Mhm,
you're talking about of, like, unloading things,
mhm,
get it off my mind. So all great advice. I think people going outside and just getting their steps and getting their sun is part of the whole beauty
mhm.
of what we have as humans here on the earth. So
And
good
I
advice.
do wanna add something else to that because you gave me a great visual, when you were talking about listening to the news and all that trash just being
Mm,
thrown at you, and it is, it's like all of these little torpedoes,
yeah.
being launched at you, and I got this image of what we do at the dojo. One of the first things we learn as a new martial arts student is to evade an attack, how to get out
Mm,
of the way, and it's, quite simple. If somebody's going to punch you, and you see it coming, you just step out of the way, and all of that negative energy goes past you, and the person actually goes right into the wall or off a proverbial cliff or whatever. All of that negative energy goes back into them.
mm,
So that's the same thing with the messages that we're getting, not only from, the media, social media, maybe even society and our friends and even family,
yes.
messages that they might be telling us that you just get out of the way, just move and just kind of like,
Mhm.
duck, you know, bait and switch, whatever, just get out of the way and pay no attention to it because words have a lot more power than we think they do.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm often accused of being too nice a guy when it comes to not taking the bait and kind of jumping into an argument. Because in the fitness world, there's all the camps and all the
Yes.
misconceptions and myths thrown around, and often with an attempt to sell something. And uh, some people's style is to go after that, or even post videos of like, here's why so and so is wrong, and I just don't do that, and I don't even engage. And I like that what you said kind of validates probably why I do that, is just to let it brush by you. Just it's
Mhm.
I don't need to
Mhm.
waste my time on it. Um, yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about the black belt stuff and the Ninpo
Okay.
Tai Jutsu, this ancient Japanese martial art. I do want to understand what's involved, like what you would compare it to. But you started training at 47. You got the black belt 10 years later. You're getting higher levels of that. So you were, I guess, 57 at that point.
Mhm.
Most of my clients, probably a lot of people listening, are between 30 and 60 on this podcast. I'm guessing, and I've seen I alluded to before. I've seen the power of somebody who's like 55, they never lifted in their life, and then they start getting these wins of like, "Hey, I'm stronger. Hey, I can do this thing in my life I haven't been able to do before." Not even the building muscle part, which then starts to come as well, and their physique
Mhm.
improves and everything else. So on board with your philosophy 100%. The listener still wants to know, what were you thinking when you started martial arts at 47?
I was thinking I had lost my frickin' mind.
Okay.
Pretty much. I did not go willingly. I'll be perfectly honest.
Mm,
Martial arts was never on my radar. It was not in my DNA. This is not anything that I would ever in my entire life thought that I would be interested in doing. My father was a black belt in karate. I have 4 sisters, so as a father of 5 girls, you could well imagine since you have 2, he wanted us to learn a few techniques, and he would always try and get us to go to the gym with him to work out, and it was like, "Ooh, icky, no."
mm,
That sounded disgusting, and no, none of us took him up on it. I
mm.
was more of a fussy girl, ballet, tutus, tiaras, point shoes, that was my thing, and I met my sensei. He was my acupuncturist before he became my sensei. I don't know if you heard this story on any of my other shows,
I'm
but,
sure I have, but the audience may not have. So,
okay.
um,
So, yeah, it's a really interesting story. One of my clients, I needed a new acupuncturist, and one of my clients recommended this guy. And she was really picky. So I thought, well, if she likes him, then he must be okay. So the very first time I went to him and he started putting needles in my legs, he got a very far away look on his face. And he said to me, with your legs and my coaching, I could teach you how to kill with these things. And I'm thinking, all right, who thinks like this? let alone says it out loud.
Uh-huh.
And I'm laying there on the table going, "I think maybe I need to go." But I was literally stuck. I was pinned to the table. I had needles all over me, so unless I wanted
And you
to
were
get
trying to
up.
relax, right?
Well, yeah, I was kinda trying to, but that
Okay.
really didn't
And
help.
he's telling you how you can kill people. Okay.
Yeah, with my legs.
Yes.
And, I mean, I was really shocked and horrified. Well, he did have a martial arts school right next to his
Mm,
clinic. It was like a little duplex. And finally I said, "Well, thanks a lot, but no, I'll just save my killer legs for ballet class." And I almost thought about not going back to him, but there was something about him I really liked. And, I felt so much better after the acupuncture treatment, so I thought I'll stick with him for a while. Well, what he did not know is right before I met him, I had a really traumatic experience. And as traumas go, a lot of times when, you try and get help and you try and report it, a lot of times, people just don't listen.
mm,
So that's basically what happened to me. So I just stuffed the trauma deep down inside, pasted a big smile on my face, and pretended that everything was fine. Well, it really wasn't. And Mark, in the meantime, that was my acupuncturist, kept trying to get me to take classes with him. And I'm like, no, no. So about a year later, the trauma came spewing out. And he was the first person I went to because I don't know why, but I knew intuitively that he would listen to me and he wouldn't judge me and he would believe me, which of course he did. So he started treating me for PTSD with needles and Chinese herbs and shiatsu, which was lovely. And then his campaign to get me on the mat went into high gear. And he kept saying, "There is such a healing power in martial arts. Cheryl, you need to do this, blah, blah, blah." And I kept looking at him saying, "I don't understand how hanging out in a smelly dojo with a bunch of sweaty men whose goal is to attack me is going to make me feel any better. I'm
mm.
sorry, I'm just not making this connection." So he never gave up. Talk about incomparable stubbornness. So about it took him 3 years. And after 3 years, I finally said, he wore me down. I said, "Okay, I will take a few classes just to prove to you how much I'm going to hate it.
Mm.
And then I'll quit."
Now, did was he doing this to everyone? Like, was this his sales pitch, or did he see something in you? Maybe in hindsight, you learned this that where he kept persisting.
Well, I don't think a lot of people ask me that. That's a great
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
Because when people find out that I ended up being his first female black belt, in 20 years of teaching, he never had a female
Yeah.
achieve that high of a rank. People say, "Oh, he saw something in you. He
Uh-huh.
saw that inner warrior. He saw this." And I said, "No, that's not true. He saw a person who was really suffering. He saw somebody who
Okay.
was struggling. And we had developed a really, warm friendship. And he just sincerely
Mm,
wanted to help me. He had no idea, that I was going to rise up through the ranks the way I did. I
mm.
had no idea. My goal was to teach him that, he couldn't tell me what to do because I was going to hate this martial art thing. But no, it was just truly amazing, and I'm very grateful to him, to this day. And like I said, I'm getting ready to test for another belt level, and it's been 20 years since I walked into that dojo.
Well, I mean, tell us more about that experience, right? Because your perspective as a woman, the only woman there
Yeah.
in the class, people listening to this show. I mean, we do talk a lot about empowering people, men and women, but especially the traditional avatar, I guess, in the fitness world is,
Mm.
a lot of movement, don't eat, a lot of restriction, light weights, you can't build muscle, you can't be strong. It's this and that. And I know a lot of it has shifted, and hopefully shows like this and others have shifted it about where strength is important, performance, fueling, building, right? Abundance, not worrying so much about whatever the ideal body image is as how do you feel great and empowered yourself. And that's going to give you the image you want. So tell us
Mhm.
about your perspective.
Well, as far as you mean being the only woman walking into class?
Yeah, you're in the fitness world in general, in the class, all of that. Yeah, we'd like to hear that.
We'll start with the dojo, because that was really weird. I knew I would see a lot of Mark's students going in and out when I was waiting for my treatment sessions. So I would see the guys, they all seemed very nice, and, they'd see me through the glass, and a lot of them would either smile or wave, and some of them would even bow
Mm,
in my direction. I'm going, "Oh, that's kind of corny." But so I knew, these guys going in and out. And when I finally started thinking about maybe taking some classes, I said, "I'm really worried about being the only woman in class. And he goes, "Oh, don't you worry. I have plenty of female students, and some of them are even higher ranking, and they would love to take you under their wing and teach you the art of the ninja and what it's like to be a female ninja and blah, blah, blah." And I'm going, okay, well, maybe this will work out. But I didn't realize that I never saw any of these women going in and out of the dojo. So, okay, I don't know why I believed him. And when it came time for me to I signed up for classes and I said, okay, I'm going to try this. And he says, don't worry, there'll be, another woman in class. Well, my first class, not only was there no other woman in class, there was no other woman with like in a 3 or 4 mile radius.
The most value that I got from this was the fact that I had someone that I could talk to about anything and that there was going to be no judgment. It was just, well, here are your goals. Here's the best way that you're going to achieve it. And then let's work together to help you feel inspired and motivated to do that. And there's a lot of people out there trying to be coaches, and not all of them have done the work. And also just be a genuine person that is positive and coming from the heart in terms of wanting to help. And Philip really embodied all of those qualities. I would recommend him to just about anyone that's looking to achieve goals in that realm of their nutrition and building new habits.
So there was me with all of these guys. I had just come straight from ballet class. My hair was still in a bun. And I'm looking, going, this isn't going to work out so well. And I felt so out of place and so incredibly uncomfortable. Talk about getting out of your comfort zone. But of course, the men were very gracious. They greeted me. They showed me where the women's dressing room
Mhm.
was, which
Which
didn't
was all
get very.
yours.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I had it all
Yeah.
to myself. And as awkward as it was, I managed to stay through the whole class, and I even got the opportunity to kick a black belt, which I tried not to because I'm like, "No, I'm not in this for the long run. I don't wanna kick you. I've never kicked anybody before." And this black belt is saying, "Come on, kick me. You can do it. You can do it." And I could tell he thought I was really adorable. And I'm like, "Look, I've never kicked anybody in my life, and I'm not about to start now." And I'm twirling my ponytail as I'm talking to
Uh-huh.
him. And then I says, "Besides, I don't wanna hurt you." And that's when I really thought, he thought I was just absolutely priceless. And
Oh,
he got
geez.
this big smile on his face and he said, "Don't worry, it's okay. I can take care of myself and you can't hurt me." And I'm like, "Okay." And then I'm looking like where his belt was located, and I'm
Mhm.
looking like in that direction, kinda south of the belt, if you know what I mean. And I says, "I don't want to get you in the sensitive parts." And he nodded and he says, "I don't want that either. Just make sure that you aim above the belt, just kick me, you'll be fine." And I'm like, "Okay." So I didn't know how to kick.
Mhm.
So what did I do? I did what I knew. I pulled my right leg up and I pointed my toes and I drove my pointed foot right through his abdomen as if I was dancing and doing a grand jeté across a
Okay.
ballet stage. Again, I did what I knew. Well, apparently I could hurt him because he actually flew backwards and landed on his butt.
Wow.
You
Okay.
know, oof. And Mark, my sensei now, walked over and he was just looking, and Wes got up and said, "Wow, that was pretty good. Where did you learn how to kick like that?" And Mark was standing next to me and he looked down at me and he said, "How many years of ballet?" And at that point, it was only 27. So I said,
Well,
27. And
and we're
he
talking about on toe and everything, formal
oh, yeah,
ballet,
on point. Oh,
strong
yeah.
feet. Okay.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah. Feet, legs, killer legs.
Yep.
And he looked at the black belt and he said, "Don't let the package fool you.
Mm.
She's a lot stronger than she looks." And it was like, boom, mental head smacking moment. I realized at that moment, I was stronger than I looked. And I
Mhm.
also realized, and I think this really is very important for the audience to hear, especially for those women out there, that we have life skills that we can carry on into a lot of different situations that we don't even realize. Who knew that the ability to do a grand jeté could basically maybe even save my life someday? I
Mm.
had no idea.
Transferable life skills. That this is good because it reminds me of so when I have a new client, one of the questions I ask them are, "What are your strengths? Like, what are your strengths that we can build from?" And
Wow.
oftentimes it's a mental strength, right? Or it's a personality kind of strength. But it reminds me of that because what you're saying is, you didn't karate or not karate. The martial arts was brand new to you, but you had effectively worked for years on things that would carry over, right?
Mhm.
Similarly, people listening probably have strengths that they are not aware of or
Mhm.
haven't exercised as much. And going into a new venture is the exact place they could exercise those skills.
Mhm.
And it's it's one less thing to learn, one less thing on the learning curve. I think
Mhm.
it's a great message. And I'm wondering, like, what is there, how can people discover that? Like, do you have any ideas on how can someone discover that? Or is it one of these things where you just try things, just be open to anything and you never know.
Well, you just said it, yeah,
Yeah.
and that is to get out of your comfort zone,
Yeah.
because like I said, I was way out of my comfort zone, and for those of your listeners who are thinking, "Well, I haven't gotten out of the off the couch, or I haven't been exercising." I have a really dear friend who does not exercise, she hates exercise, and she was telling me about it one time on the phone, and she says, "Well, I just don't exercise and blah, blah, blah," and I says, "Wait a minute, didn't you tell me that you and John went out dancing last night?"
Mm.
And she says, "Oh, yeah, country swing and line dancing, blah, blah, blah." And they danced nonstop for 4 hours. I'm like, Ronnie, that's
Yeah, pretty
exercise.
much.
Moving is exercise, any kind of movement. And for those people who are still maybe a little skeptical, you know how to move. You know how to exercise. You know how to play because you did that when you were a baby, when you were a child. You go back to using like the environment as your playground
Mm.
and not worry about, am I doing this right? Am I doing it wrong? Just when we were kids, we didn't worry about that. We
Yep.
just moved.
It's true. Yeah. But play should never end, no matter how
Yeah.
old you are. And I mean, having kids, I definitely see that, when they want me to play with them, the answer should be yes, as much as it can be, when I'm not, let's just like slam with work or something. Oh, that's really good because what something else came to mind, if I can still have it in my brain. You were talking about movement and dance. Yeah, I guess two things come to mind. One is the idea that if you can do things that you're already doing in some extent, but
Mhm.
shift that in a new direction, it's much lower
Mhm.
friction, right? Much less
Right.
resistance to doing something else. The other thing is trying things you've never done before, despite
Mhm.
thinking you quote unquote won't like them. Kind of give
Mhm.
yourself a chance because you really don't know until
Mhm.
weeks, months in. It depends on what we're talking about. But even when you talk about exercise, it's like,
Mhm.
if you've never done it before, try it. And then if you do it right and you get results, that may actually cause you to like it.
Right.
that
Exactly.
creating that feedback loop. So is that what you found? That I guess, how long did your resistance last getting into martial arts before it was like, oh, I actually love this?
Oh boy, that's a really great question. But I want to go back to the playing.
Okay. Sure.
Because, when that is really an important part of my martial arts training, and that might sound like really
Hmm.
crazy, but just when you're playing, that's the best way to learn.
Hmm.
And it takes a lot of pressure off of you. So even when, for those of you who might want to try, a dance class or something, be okay with being really bad at it.
Hmm.
And be okay with making mistakes because that's how we learn is by making mistakes. And
Yes.
whatever you do, do it in the spirit of playfulness. And that's the one thing that even on my very first day of that that class, even before I kicked Wes in the gut, that I was impressed by how well, first I thought it was really stupid, all of the bowing and some of the
Mhm.
ritual bowing in and stuff. I thought, God, these people are grown-ups. I can't believe they're doing this. It was so
Mhm.
silly. But after that, after all of the formal ray in, how much everybody laughed and seemed to be having a good time, even though they were beating the crap out of each other, which made me incredibly nervous.
Mhm.
But they were really having fun. And that's a big part of our training is that we play. So after that first class, I giggled the entire way home. I had no idea why I was giggling. I do know that I had not giggled in a very long time.
Mhm.
But there was something about it, I just felt like somebody had lifted a weight off of me, and I felt younger than I had in a very long time. And it wasn't until but I still wasn't all in, okay? Let's be clear about that. I
Mhm.
still wasn't all in, this was a temporary gig for me. I was just
Okay.
gonna take maybe a month of classes and then quit because I didn't want it to interfere with my ballet schedule. So, I was shocked when I found myself writing a check for the next month's tuition because I thought, "Man, I should be, checking out by now." Well, at the end of the 3rd month, while I was still training, one of the guys came up to me and said, "You need to test for your yellow belt." And I says, "Oh, no, you don't understand. I don't want a yellow belt. I'm never gonna test. I'm just in it to learn a few things. I'm gonna quit pretty soon, so there's no reason for me to test."
Mm.
And so this guy badgered me until finally it was like just to get him to shut up. I tested for my yellow belt. And I mean, it was terrifying. I mean, I almost passed out. I was so nervous. It was just absolutely, and I'm sure I was an absolute mess, but I passed. And so I got my yellow belt. And I giggled the entire way home. I'm looking at this stupid yellow belt and it was just like, "Why am I giggling? Why is this?" Because I don't really care. I mean, I don't want this belt,
Mhm.
but it was just such an amazing experience. The next day when I went to the dojo, I couldn't even come out of the dressing room because I tied my belt, and every time I looked at it, I'd burst into giggles. It was just stupid. So, I figured at that point, I was kinda liking it, but I still probably wouldn't stay much longer. 3 months later, the same guy badgers me into going for my 2nd degree yellow belt,
Mhm.
and I'm going,
Mhm.
"You are way too obsessed with all this testing. Why don't you just lighten up a little bit?" So finally, I tested for my 2nd degree yellow belt. Well, 3 months later, I got the idea to test for my orange belt. Nobody had to talk me into it.
Okay.
Nobody had to badger me to do it. It was my idea when I realized I know all this material. And at that point, I realized I was all in.
Yeah.
However, I never expected to go all the way to black belt. Never.
Right. That's I'm sure the questions that come to the listener's mind are like, well, if you kind of found it silly on the way and were resistant to doing the testing, why did you keep going from one to the next? Was there something deeper that was like, driving you toward excellence, even though you didn't quite accept the rituals? What I'm getting at, like what,
Yeah, I
because
do.
people want to know, like, what is the secret? If they have a thing that they want to achieve.
Mhm,
Maybe it's some simple thing for their health. Maybe it's their workouts, whatever.
mhm.
Where does that momentum start to overtake the friction, and what gets you there?
Boy, that is a great question, and I'm thinking the momentum and the friction, boy, that described me
Yeah.
to a T.
Yeah.
I really honestly believe what kept me going was the fact that I didn't want a black belt. I didn't care about climbing up the ranks. I cared about living to, see another day or get through another class. For the first 2 years, and a lot of people don't know this, but the first 2 years that I was taking classes, I would sit in my car and have to talk myself into going into the dojo, and by that time, I knew the guys really well. We were friends. We had a wonderful time training, but there was always in the back of my mind, "What if something goes terribly wrong today?" And I would just kind of force myself. Once I crossed that doorway, so this is another important message for the listeners. Sometimes you just have to walk through the door. Once I would walk through the door and I was in the dojo, the smelly dojo, I knew I was okay. And I just wanted to be better at the art, not because I wanted to be a great martial artist, but I wanted to understand the movement patterns better. I started to become really fascinated with the history and the philosophy of the art itself. It's an ancient Japanese martial art, and so there is an awful lot of, the history and the philosophy in there, as well as the spirit. We talk a lot about training our spirit. So it's not just training. You know this even with what you do in the fitness industry. It's not just physical. You're actually strengthening and growing your entire being. And especially as a martial artist, that's really, really important to us. And I could feel my spirit starting to rise. I could feel my spirit getting stronger. And, it just, there were days when, even like today, it's like, I don't think I want to go to class today, but 11:30 is gonna come along and I'll be driving to the dojo.
Mm.
And sometimes you just have to do it. Sometimes you just have to take that first step, and once you're there, it'll change your whole perspective for your whole day. It can change your entire week. It can change your life.
I think what you're saying is really important because you've been doing this for so long, and yet still there is that thought of, am I really going to walk in today? Right. And I think people
Mhm.
can relate to that because we all want it to be this perfect thing where once you fall in love with the process, that it takes no willpower and you just do it and you're on autopilot. And we know that's not the case. I know I love working out and going to the gym. I have a gym at home. And yet there's always something about it. Like if it's squat day, I'm just like, I don't want to do squats. but at the same time, there's so many things pushing you, and I don't,
Mhm,
and I know you say it's like forcing yourself, you just have to do it, but I also see that there is a lot of momentum. You mentioned the knowledge that you were gaining, the understanding the movement patterns. You were fascinated by all these different things, the mastery of the material, the history, the philosophy, the art, the spirit. So there were enough things where you're like, this is just a fun, part of my life, that
mhm,
if one piece of it is a little bit hard, that's okay, because the rest of it is just
mhm,
it wouldn't be worth it to skip out on all of that.
mhm.
And so that kind of like, when you set the balance there of momentum versus friction, you've kind of tilted it, which is answering the question that I asked. So thank you.
Right. Well, okay, but, and this we really haven't touched on this, but,
Okay.
the other thing is the guys once I learned how to communicate with them because, there I was 47, I hadn't had male friends since college, and, ballet class, yeah, there's a few men in class, but it's a completely different energy, and none of them were interested in trying to attack me.
Hmm.
And they're just it was a completely different energy. I mean, and it's not that these guys were so macho, but they were all American men and with families and everything. And it's like I don't even know how to talk to these guys. And eventually, we got to be really good. They didn't know how to talk to me either because the women that would come into the dojo along the way were a lot less girly than me. They were really wanted to kick butt and all that stuff, and they wanted to be black belts. And it was like, I'm just here for, short term. And I had to excuse myself and step off the mat so I could fix my lipstick and, my hair. And they're like, and they would try and attack me, and I would just run screaming off the mat, going, no, don't touch me. And they're like, you know, who is this
What
creature?
is he doing here? Yeah.
Right, exactly. But it was probably once I got that second-degree yellow belt and they started realizing and started taking me more seriously, and, I can hardly blame them because I didn't take my own self seriously, but they started to help me and give me little hints and tips about how to use my feminine wiles to be able to train better. They also started whispering this word as they passed me, "Kuniichi," and I'm like, "Well, that sounds kinda dirty. What is that?" And it's actually the female warrior.
Okay.
And so they were playing off of my femininity and my
Okay.
feminine wiles to help make me a better martial artist. And I have to tell you, this it's really kind of funny. Of course, I said I have 5 or 4 sisters, 3 girl cousins, ballet class for over, now over 40 years. So all of this feminine energy around me, didn't know how to talk to men. And the first time one of them called me to see if I wanted to meet him, off class time to do some training. And, so it's like, okay. And after he says, okay, see you then. And he hung up. And I'm holding the phone going, oh my goodness, I had no idea that you could carry on a complete conversation in 30 seconds with a few monosyllables, grunts, and a see you at the end of it. And it was like a choir of angels began to sing because I thought, this is so liberating. Where's the drama?
Mm.
And it was just like, wow, the way that men communicate is so different and uncomplicated than the way women communicate. That just opened up a whole new world for me.
That is true. We're simpletons. No, I'm just
No, I like to say that
no,
you're
no, we're
not
direct.
complex.
Yeah, I tend to be
You're
very
very
direct.
direct. And
Very
it's
direct.
really funny because even in my second book, the Ninja book, under acknowledgments, I acknowledged the many magnificent men in my life because I would not be here doing what I do
Yeah.
right now and having, the background that I have without their help.
Mhm.
I will admit some of them were kind of jerks along the way, but that was okay. But most of them were incredible and really helped me get to where I am.
You make a good point that men and women can learn a lot just from the other gender. I mean, that
Mhm,
right there in life, there's so much you can learn about. I mean, for me, being married, learning about empathy and listening and so many skills that I, identified with myself as being terrible and eventually had to build. So it's true. I'm curious about the martial arts itself, though. I do want to ask about that because just
mhm,
I have it on my list because I want to understand how practical are these martial arts into real life situations. Like, you maybe you get this question all the time, but if somebody came up to you on the street, threatened you, pulled a gun, something like that, like what
mhm.
would is this style effective as a defense mechanism?
Very much so,
Okay.
very effective. I have never had to use it in that type of a real life situation, but I use the skills and the energy every single day. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm not a target. And even, Sensei had told me one time, he says, you develop an aura, like an energy field around you. And people know predators are looking for an easy target. And if they see somebody who looks like an empowered person, they're going to move on and go to somebody else. Um, uh, if anybody ever pulled a gun on me, I pray to God that never happens. I have no idea what I would do, but I do have some confidence that I would pull something out to
Mhm,
save myself,
mhm.
you know,
Okay.
and even we practice break falls, every class. We have a series of falls and rolls and tumbling, which, I didn't realize that when I first signed up.
Mhm,
And that was a big shock. Because getting on the floor, something I did not do. Well, I'm pretty good at it now. And I even had a spectacular fall. It was, when was it? It was New Year's Day. And I'd gone to the dojo. And as I was walking out, the sun had, there was, it had iced over. There was black
mm,
ice, and I didn't know
right.
it. So I was carrying a bunch of stuff in my arms. And one minute I was just stepping, on the cement. And the next minute I knew I was on the ground. And I actually had flown up in the air. And, when I hit, it was like, "Damn, what happened here?" And I looked, and all my stuff was scattered around me in a circle. My notebook, my water bottle, my
Mhm.
keys, my katana, pages flew out of my notebook. I hit that hard. And, the men came running out to see if I was okay because they heard it and saw it. And I just looked at them. The first thing I said was, "Did you see my break fall?" Because it must have been really spectacular. I was not hurt at all.
Wow.
I
So
mean,
you
once
just instinctually, you know what to do.
I didn't even think about it, I just intuitively did a break fall, and I always wondered, would I be able to pull it out? I don't wanna be challenged like that again anytime
Sure.
soon, and, and I thought even as I was driving home, man, a little bit of the trauma reaction shaking, and I'm like,
Yeah,
"No, nothing terrible happened," and I thought maybe I should take an Advil or 2 just prophylactically, and it was like, "No, see what you feel like in the
yeah.
morning," and I felt fantastic, I
Oh,
felt
that's great.
great.
Now you mentioned tumbling. Is there a grappling like BJJ or anything like that?
We do some floor work,
Mm,
but our skill set is basically in standing. Our
okay.
philosophy is we never wanna be on the floor because there's always gonna be somebody who is far more skilled than we are
Okay.
at the grappling, the BJJ, mixed martial arts. There's a lot of that. Our goal is to be able to go home.
Okay. So how would you compare it to that and maybe like Krav Maga or boxing, right? Which are often
Oh,
touted as like very strong ways to defend yourself too.
yeah, Krav, that's great. That's a great, yeah, if you really want to, kick ass, take names, and really do kill stuff, Krav's glorious.
Yeah.
Krav is great. If you wanna go home with somebody's DNA underneath your fingernails or, yeah,
Uh-huh,
Krav, it is.
uh-huh.
I took a Krav class one time. It was, a woman's group, and I was invited, and I thought, "I really don't wanna do this," but, to be a team player, I went along with it, and gosh, there were probably 30 women in class, and one of the women said to the instructors, female instructors, "What is the difference between this and some other martial arts?" And they looked at each other, and one of them said, "It's all martial and no art."
Got it.
And it actually came out of Israel, and they were trained,
Secret service, yeah, or a secret, yeah, yeah, right.
yeah, to be able to fight
Facade, yeah,
without weapons and to be able to kill without weapons. I mean, if you really wanna get down and dirty, and Krav is great for
right,
that.
right.
It didn't appeal to me because maybe with the ballet background, I'm a little bit more, artistic,
Sure.
and one thing I love about our art, it's very sneaky.
Okay,
It's not, I mean, if you would look at me walking down the street, you wouldn't think, "Hey, she's really a martial artist." You wouldn't think that,
right.
and that's part of the ninja disguise.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look. I haven't looked researched, and I want to look up some videos, or maybe if you have something you want to send me of yourself doing it, I would love to see that. So, if you had to, women who are listening who want to know how to protect themselves or increase their confidence, or all the things that you gain from this,
Mm.
any strategies for them, besides just doing exactly what you did, but everyone's gonna have a different thing that works for them.
Right, not everybody is gonna wanna spend 20 years in a smelly dojo with a bunch
Mhm.
of sweaty
Sure,
men getting,
exactly.
punched and smacked around, and I can totally understand that. I wasn't so excited about it myself at first, but if I just wanna list a couple of things
Mhm.
because they're really, really important to me. Every time I see a woman doing this, it breaks my heart. Please put your cell phone down. There is no text, there is no call, there is nothing that is so important that that phone should occupy your attention instead of your surroundings. Pay attention to your surroundings at all times, not to be hyper vigilant, but to be taking notes, like mental notes, like that is an interesting looking person. I wonder why they're wearing that. I wonder this person looks like they're having a really bad day by their posture. Paying attention to your environment and the people around you is a powerful tool for self empowerment. And you could even, this is what I love because you have two little girls, you could actually even play games, turn it into a game at the park, and hey, what did you notice? And what color was that dog? And if you had to tell somebody, where you were at and what things look like, that you're training them in a way that's playful too.
Mm.
So it's not threatening, not you have to be afraid of everything, but just to be aware. So that awareness is so important. Put your phone down, start working on your awareness. The other thing, of course, this is the awareness too. Be careful where you park, not to be worried, but to pay attention. Always have your eyes up, look people in the eye, even strangers, smile at them, say hello, because then people know that you're paying attention. People
Mm.
know that you're looking, and
That's a
that
good
is
point.
very empowering. Pay attention to how you walk and how you stand. When you're talking to somebody, let's say you're in a crowded room, a networking event, I talk with my hands a lot just because I always used to. But even now, when you have your hands in front of you and using them as self expression, they can always be used to knock somebody else's hand out of the way.
Mm.
Never stand with your, hands crossed because that's in front of you. That's considered disrespectful. Hands on hip is considered confrontational.
Mm.
Hands behind your back, you might be holding a weapon. So just be
Okay.
careful of your body language and watch somebody else's body language as well.
This is great advice. What about in a restaurant? Do you recommend sitting facing the door?
Oh yeah. Oh
That's one
yeah.
I've always done. Like my family knows like I'm the guy that has to sit far from the door facing the door.
Yeah.
That's
I
what I
want
like.
to see everything that's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, paranoia is not paranoia when it's what's the phrase, right? It isn't paranoia once it isn't paranoia or something. You know what I'm
I don't know
talking
what the
about.
phrase is, but I think that a healthy dose of
Yeah,
paranoia is really important to have.
yeah.
And
Just
the
be
other thing,
aware, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, being aware, and again, as you're back to the wall watching, for the audience, pay attention when you walk into a restaurant, a new building, someplace you haven't been before. First thing you do, look for the exits. Know
Yep.
where the exits are.
Yeah. Even if it's just for safety, if there was a, fire or something like that,
Right,
right?
exactly. Right, right. We're not thinking, nothing bad's gonna happen, but if you
Yeah.
wanted to make a quick escape. The other thing is, I used to cringe when sensei would say this, but everything's a weapon.
Mhm.
We all walk around with water bottles nowadays,
Yep.
and that's really a good thing to have. So put your phone in your purse, but your water bottle in your hand. I like the ones that have the little hook where you can kinda swing it a little bit.
There you go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Make sure it's always full.
Yeah, my wife tells me about the keys between the fingers, you know?
Ugh. Okay, but the keys
Oh,
between the fingers,
uh,
the problem with that is you have
okay.
to be really close to the person.
Okay. Fair enough,
I
because you
have
don't have much,
something
distance there. Yeah.
Yeah, I have something called a kubiton,
Okay.
so you can look that up. I'm sure you can buy one online. Kubiton, and it's just a little stick with your keys on the end of it, and you hold it, like you're holding a pencil or a pen, and you can swing the keys. Imagine what you could do with that.
Okay. Alright. Kinda like
And
a
the
key
last bit of
maze.
yes, the last bit of advice I want to share with the audience, especially the women out there, do look into taking a self-defense class or 2.
Mhm.
And don't just take one class and think, "I'm good." Take it a couple of times. Take it with a bunch of girlfriends, have a ninja night, and practice some of these techniques with each other, talk about the philosophies, talk about different scenarios of how you could get out of the way, how you could protect yourself. Knowledge is power, and the more you
Mhm.
know, the safer you're gonna be.
Love all this advice, and if you get strong in the process or, focus on your health that way, and they complement each other, don't they? Because a stronger person who also knows how to fight, that's pretty good. Pretty good
Right.
combination.
That's a happy coincidence.
Yeah. Alright, so I do like to ask this of all guests. I wanna respect your time. I know we're wrapping up here, but is there a question you wish I had asked you, and what is your answer?
Oh, yeah, I thought about that. I don't know, maybe if you could have asked me, "What would you like your legacy to be?"
Okay. What would you like your legacy to be?
That there's a warrior in each and every one of us, an incredible strength and power, and if I could find mine, oh, trust me, you can find yours.
Love it. We're gonna leave it. We're gonna leave it at that. Cheryl, this has been a pleasure. There's a lot of great strategies here for people and a lot of insights we had, myself included. I always love podcasts because we learn through our interviews, and therefore I know the
Mhm.
listeners learning. So, where can listeners learn more about you and your work?
You can go to my website. It's CherylIlov.com. Remember, there's no E at the end of I love. Everybody puts one on there. Even I do it sometimes out of habit. You can find my website. I do have, if you sign up for my newsletter, you have access to three, what I call, you're going to love this, Philip, after we talked about meditation. You have access to three audio recordings of, I call it meditation through movement. They're actually somatic movement exercises based on Feldenkrais. They're only 20 minutes long. You can download them and then unsubscribe. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm probably more active there than anywhere else. You can also contact me through my website if you have any questions, especially if you're a woman and you're thinking about taking some martial arts classes and you'd like some advice. Contact me. I would be happy to guide you through the process, because if you do want to study a martial art or even just take some self defense classes, you want to be in the right spot. You do not want to be in the wrong school or the wrong dojo. I was fortunate because I got into a school that absolutely loves women. It's a very friendly, user friendly dojo, so I can give you tips on what to look for.
Perfect. So I will add those links there, the website, IG, definitely. Cheryl's super responsive. And if you need help with anything we talked about, I always encourage you to reach out to any of our guests, but Cheryl, especially for questions, I'm sure she'll help you out. Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your awesome story, amazing things we could all learn from and take action from. So appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Philip. And I do want to say one last thing. Philip is going to be on my podcast next week. So stay tuned and listen to what he has to say.
And the name of the podcast?
The FemiNinja Project.
There
And
you
men are always welcome on the FemiNinja Project. And that's one of the things that I make very clear. I love having guys on the show.
Yes, yes, you do. And so the FemiNinja Project, you can find it. I think it's all one word,
It is.
because if you put a space there, it may not show up. So all one word, the FemiNinja Project. You're listening to this show now, so it's easy to go follow it and subscribe her show, and then you'll also catch my interview there and all of her other great episodes. So thank you again, Cheryl, for coming on.
Thank you, Philip. Have a wonderful day.
You too.